What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review, and this is our once to twice weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And this time we are back for more Dominaria United stories, and this time more of the side stories. The third side story, they're not actually numbered, but this is the third one, in Death and Salvation by Dan Sheehan. My quick review at the top of this one is that my opinion is probably a little bit less important than Amy's on this one because I still very much enjoyed it. Let's say that, right, off the bat. I enjoyed the story a lot. I'll talk about little things here and there that left me with questions, but I'm glad this story exists. It absolutely is quintessential side story where it's very good, but if you don't read it, it doesn't affect your understanding of the overall story one iota. But it's got a fan favorite character in it, so if you're a fan of this character or aware of this character at all, you should read this story because there are big changes for that character.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I loved this story. You know, it's goblin-y, which I like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It, as you said, I think if goblins aren't your favorite, then maybe it's not as important for you to read this. Maybe. It's on the edge. But if you do like goblins, definitely read it.
Good point.
You know, for the overall understanding the scope of what is happening for the overall story that is gonna come, I think it's a stepping stone, right? For you to be able to be oh, there's another one. There's another one.
Yeah.
There's another one. Yeah. I purposefully left that nice and vague because if you didn't read the story, then you need to do that now.
So there you go. So here's my time to take over then. So yes, if either of those reviews make the story sound interesting enough to you and you have not gotten a chance to read it yet and or in any capacity want to go read the story or remind yourself of it or what have you, instead of you having to go look for it, the top link in the description down below will take you to that story so that you can read it for yourself and you can learn about it like we did. And of course, whether you are reminding yourself of it, whether you're reading it for the first time, what have you, if you are leaving, we would love it then if you would come back when you are done and join us for our full review, which will start in just a moment. So thank you. But before we go on to the full review, as we want to do, first, hi, welcome to the channel. Thanks for being here. Please don't forget that while you are here, if you're enjoying the things that we're doing on this channel and you want to see more, the best way to do that and to let us know that you're enjoying it is to subscribe and ring that bell so that you will get notifications whenever any of our videos come out, including more JaARs, because I was saying to Amy before we started filming, after this one we still have 3 more to go for Dominaria United, plus there's technically the Planeswalkers guide as well, so it's likely 4 more. But 3 more of the side and main stories, and then the Planeswalkers guide, and then maybe there are some other things here and there, maybe there aren't. I think the Legends article might be kind of interesting, so I'll look into that as well. We'll keep our eyes peeled and we'll keep you notified, but that's why I say, if you ring that bell, you'll get those notifications whenever any of those videos come out, no matter what we decide to put up. And in fact, if you missed it this past week, or this past weekend, it was pre-release. We had a ton of fun being at our sponsor store. Shoutouts to Champion Card Collector in Poughkeepsie, New York. Awesome people. We had an amazing weekend there. And on Friday, specifically Friday night, we filmed 2 different videos. One was us opening 4 different pre-release kits. So if you, especially, I mean, really, if you want to watch the video in general, we encourage you to do so. But if you did not get a chance to get out to a pre-release and you want to see some kits being opened, please feel free to live vicariously through us. You can even click that link in the top corner that will take you to that video for yourself so that you can check it out, because we highly encourage you to do so. And honestly, I did not check. There was one comment that said that they took a code, so if you need a code for MTG Arena, You should be able to get them there. I make no promises if they're all there. Some people may not have left it in the comments, but regardless, there might be codes available for you. And if not, if you sub and ring the bell like I mentioned before, sorry, I keep making you do that. If you will mention, or if you stay tuned, we have more kits that we will be opening in the future that will have codes. And if you have your notifications available, then you will be able to find out exactly when the videos come out. If you see that it's an opening, get in, watch it, and get your code as quickly as possible.
Right.
We want...
Before somebody else snipes it.
We want our loyal viewers to be able to be the ones to get them, because it's, like I always say in those videos, it's our way of saying thank you, or one of the ways that we say thank you in gifting things. So definitely feel free to do that. And then last reminder, we have 2 other channels as well, Video Games for All and Gluten Free for All. Links down in the description box below. So please feel free to go there, sub, ring the bells there as well. It really helps us out a lot. Plus, there's some really cool stuff going on over there. We actually just finished our full run of Final Fantasy VII. Amy, having seen the game not one iota before we started playing, and then we did start to finish with our friend Dave, so you should definitely go check that series out. That was incredible. We're always playing Pokemon over there, so we're currently on to Pokemon Sapphire. That's every Tuesday, and now every Wednesday, now that Final Fantasy VII is done, we have started a new series, which just premiered this past Wednesday, of Amy, for the first time ever, seeing Banjo-Kazooie.
Yes.
That was definitely an incredible series, and we encourage you to check that out too. And then, last but not least, on Sundays, we have our playthrough of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney.
Yeah, that's got to be over soon too, I think.
Soon-ish, yeah. We're in the 5th and final case. We have been for a couple of weeks, but it's a long one, so
yeah.
Keep checking back in. There's at least 4 more left, I think, at least. So it's still got another month or so, but yeah, it's getting down to the wire. And then in that place, once we get to that point, then we will get into our spooky video of the on that channel. And then I mentioned, with releases, Gluten Free for All does 1 video a month. So we already had one last month. Now that it is September, there will be a new one coming out very soon. So stay tuned for that as well. But that was a lot longer than we usually do, but we have a lot of stuff specifically going on in relation to pre-release and for this particular set, so thank you for bearing with us. Let's get on to the full review itself. Do you want to start? This is your boy, so, I want you to be able to if you want.
So Squee was never my favorite, as he was kind of before my time, but I always loved just goblins in general. And now he's the king of the goblins.
Of this clan of goblins,
right.
But yes.
Of goblins turned Phyrexians.
Yeah, much to his chagrin, I'm sure.
Exactly. But he's got 1 loyal follower left.
Bulb is pretty cool. I would not be surprised if Bulb becomes definitely a character that people cry out for, and so Bulb is either in a Commander product or a later Dominaria release set or something like that. Bulb seems really cool, and so I'm hoping that that Bulb gets some representation in card art and or creature card form.
Yeah. So, I guess I wanted to start out, they talked about, in the beginning, like, people kind of poking fun at goblins and kind of saying that they die all the time and making them die in all of these plays and stuff because... it's funny the goblin died. It's funny to you because you don't love the goblins, clearly. Not same. But yeah, do you remember what it was before? I guess it didn't really have one before that. But they talked about how, they talked about sort of the cultural interaction with humans, I guess you could kind of say, or other races.
Sort of. I mean, it was more just talking about everyone knows that death is a thing. Death exists for all mortal beings, and that every race kind of handles it differently, right? For humans, it's like an eventuality. For elves, it's like very far away, right? Because they can live to be hundreds of years old. But goblins, it's like
pretty soon,
constant, right? Like there's a constant threat of death at any given time for them, and that's kind of the comparisons that were drawn, I think, at the beginning there.
But I liked that they said that there was really only one goblin idiom for the fact that goblins are kind of faced with the threat of death sort of every day, and it's just not me, not today. And that's really cool because it's like this sort of I don't know, it's like a different culture.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, okay, I live in a place and am exposed to things, and I'm a risk taker inherently, and so all of these things sort of factor into the fact that I am constantly faced with death, but also I'm not afraid of it.
Right. And that's your kind of philosophy towards life is, you know, how you handle the fear of death, or the ever presence, I guess, of death.
Right. Because it's not really a fear, right? I think they kind of live above that.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of get a bad rap because I think other creatures who do fear death think of them as being silly and stupid for being so such risk-taking creatures that would expose themselves to death and the threat of death so frequently. So I think the not me, not today idiom is really cool because I think in the real world there's a parallel, right? People who live in areas that are really dangerous, or maybe have a really dangerous job or really dangerous hobbies.
Sure.
I think kind of live by that same sort of creed, right? That same sort of like saying, you know, like, okay, you know, I made it through today, you know, and maybe the guy next to me got injured very badly, but I'm fine. So, and which means I have another day to keep on doing the same thing that's gonna end up possibly getting me killed, you know? I mean, some people, I think, depending on what it is, that's, you know, there's a line where it becomes reckless, right? But there's also a line where it's necessary and thoughtful and, you know, just a way of life for people, right?
Sure.
So I like that idiom a lot. In that area, it talked about Squee helping against the Phyrexians 400 years ago, which like really gave us some context for how fucking old he is at this point.
Sure, and I mean, you know, we've heard that Joda is centuries old as well. We know Teferi is an old walker, so like, it's that whole idea of like how long ago those stories are depicting. And I wanted to talk a bit about timeline, so if you don't mind the brief interruption. So it mentioned that Squee has been in charge of the goblins, these goblins, in charge of them, has been their king for a century, around 100 years. So that's a long time. And I guess we haven't really gotten to that yet, but you're not really... I guess you're kind of doing a timeline thing, so maybe I'll talk about it later.
No, keep going, because I was just going to start working my things off of your stuff.
Okay, so... They talk about the fact that Squee has been the king of this goblin clan for 100 years. Now, based on the stories that we've been reading, and I don't just mean the Dominaria United stories, but going back to Kaldheim and etc., we've been seeing that the Phyrexians have really only been trying to fight their way back outwardly recently. Like, that they've somehow found a way to travel to other planes recently, and only recently. So, it's a little bit weird for me to try to figure out how an entire goblin clan gets completed out from under the king's nose, all but one goblin. You know what I mean? Like, that seemed a little odd to me. Now, they did show, or the story did show, that Squee had a little escape hatch out the back where he could go up to the human civilization, but that would mean that there would have needed to be Phyrexian scouts watching that place, knowing that Squee was leaving, waiting until he left, sneaking in while he was gone, and completing all of the goblins in the clan all at once like that.
And it would have had to really have been when Bulp wasn't there. So it would have had to have been they waited until Bulp left to send the to give the message out or whatever.
Yeah, but then they would have had to,
like,
they would have had to do it while Squee was dead, which doesn't make sense. I don't think he's dead that long or long enough.
Well, I didn't think so either, but that's why it's stupid.
I just don't understand. Like, it seems a little odd because they're like in the mountain. It specifically says they can never, not that they can never leave, but that they never leave, right? Because Squee literally has an escape hatch for that exact reason. So why would he need that if they're free to come and go as they please? They're not. So how does a Phyrexian get in and complete every single goblin without the king knowing about it and or Bulp knowing about it? It seemed a little far-fetched to me. Like, it's like, oh, okay.
Oh, okay, so the sleeper agents can't then also change people into Phyrexians.
So, it's a very good question. It's very unclear in how these stories are being told how the sleeper agents work. Because we've been told two different things, right? We've been told that the sleeper agents don't know that they're sleeper agents until the moment where they do know that they're sleeper agents.
Right.
So, and yet when Squee is completed, he's able to look down at his arms and see the seams, and the seams split open because he thought about it. So, like, I don't know whether it makes sense that, like, they could just open up their arms, the black cables shoot out, and they complete each other, or whether they just don't know that they're Phyrexians until they need to know that they're Phyrexians, like when Urtai shows up, wakes them all up as Phyrexians, and then they all, like, pile on Squee and complete Squee as well. It's a little unclear. But that's not a problem with this story, that's a problem with these stories. It is very unclear. Now, there are two ways to look at that, right? We've complained about this a couple of times now, or at least questioned it. I don't want to necessarily say complained about, but questioned it a couple of times now. There's a couple of ways that you can look at it. You can look at it as, hey, we're supposed to be on the side of the heroes, so we don't fully understand how it works because we're not Phyrexians.
Right.
But we're also being told all of this information as if it is pure fact. Like, this is how this is, no question. And, like, so it works that way. They were, even Sten didn't know until it was too late.
Right.
Like, okay, I guess I have to take your word for it because I have no other knowledge whatsoever, and I don't know that that's going to get answered, like, one way or another. I think that's just, we're supposed to believe that, but then the next story that we read, like, doesn't make sense in terms of that at all. Like, how did they complete 100, no, well, I don't think it was 100 goblins, but a large number of goblins under the king's nose without him knowing? And if goblins, I guess maybe the implication is because it had been a whole week without anyone dying, that maybe it was during that week that they were all Phyrexians, because as we saw with Rarp, when Rarp gets killed, Rarp is still alive as a Phyrexian. So maybe the sleeper agents are being more cautious than goblins typically would be, or these goblins typically would be, and so that's why there has been a week of prosperity and no death. Again, I have no idea.
They were also, like, acting like goblins. Like, they weren't acting like Phyrexians. They were acting like goblins, which is why, like, he didn't get tipped off to it.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, rah, rah, you jumped and killed yourself so that you could be reborn, and we love when you do that. It's a real knee slapper, you know.
Yeah.
You know, they kept doing that. And Phyrexians, like, I mean, again, we don't know enough about the sleeper agents, right? But I have a feeling that Phyrexians, even if they were pretending to not be Phyrexians, wouldn't act like that, right?
Again, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. It's a fair one. If you have thoughts about anything, by the way, I didn't mention this earlier. If you have thoughts about anything that we're talking about, opinions, comparing or contrasting with ours, that's what the comment section down below is for. Keep the conversation going. We would love to hear from you. Sorry.
Okay. I was just going to say, what's her name? The woman who we talked to about the lights?
Spurna, Ember Mage.
Spurna. She's like, oh, it's a bad idea to turn off these lights because you know how goblins can be.
Yeah, when the lights go down, it raises the debauchery levels.
Right.
And Squee's like, yeah, it's a party. I want the debauchery levels to be up, you know?
So was she saying that as a sleeper agent, like as... Okay, so we know she was a Phyrexian at the time, but was she saying that because that's true about goblins... and she thought that these already changed into Phyrexian goblins would be that way? Or did she say that because goblins are that way and she wanted to seem like she wasn't a Phyrexian? Or did she say that because... yeah, I mean, I guess those are the two options.
Oh, again...
Like, is she just trying to, like... keep up the charade, or is she trying to like does she really mean that in the moment that like they're gonna get rowdy if we turn the lights off? Because if they're just Phyrexians basically, then are they really gonna get as rowdy?
Oh yeah, no, I think you're looking too much into it. But we talked about this before we started filming as well. I think your initial thought was correct in that she saw through Squee's ruse, right? Squee was like, oh, can we just turn the mana lamps off and just use torchlight? And what Squee wanted to do was look into their eyes to see which one of them had the gold, like the gold underneath, to determine who were sleeper agents. And Spurna, I think, and you thought as well, saw through that. Right. And so it was just like trying to make up an excuse.
That was the third option,
right.
Yeah. And I just couldn't remember it just now. But it was that Squee being able to see the ring, maybe she was clued into him being able to see the ring.
Well, or realizing that that's why he was asking for that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so, and then of course, when he finally, like, gets to the point of insisting, basically, that's when she's like, okay, well, you asked for it, and then stabs him and throws him off the building. You know, haha, I've revealed myself.
Right.
You know?
Well, and that kind of a reaction makes you feel like it's the third one, right?
Yeah.
It makes you feel like, well, okay, this is a direct reaction to him insisting, no, I need to see the rings of your eyes, basically.
Yeah.
And her knowing that that's what he's saying, even though he's saying it in code. And her saying, well, you've asked for it. You're sitting there saying, you need to see the ring, I'll show you the ring. You know?
Yeah.
I'm going to stab you.
You liked this aspect, too. Originally.
Spoos?
That's it, Squeak.
Oh.
Sorry. Sorry, it's my handwriting, everybody. Sorry.
It was like spoos. So Squee challenged the warlord to save the goblins by letting the warlord kill him. Yeah. So his like way of defeating any warlords that came and tried to like I don't know, steal his seat, or it was just so he could get the seat?
Yeah, it was. He found a group of goblins that were being subjugated by a warlord, and so he stepped up, challenged the warlord, and got his clan.
I thought it was just kind of in general saying that, like, from then until, you know, indefinitely, basically, he fought against people trying to, you know, do whatever.
No, it was just the one warlord, but he mentioned that he used like an old fighting tactic that he had learned over the years or whatever.
Which was just, I'll let you kill me over and over and over again until you get so tired that you know, faint essentially and just walk away.
And I mean, not for nothing, right? I am no boxing expert, but I believe that is a tactic in boxing. Not until they faint, but that if you're able to just take punches enough, or dodge and bob and weave and block and stuff enough, you can exhaust your opponent. I mean, if they're throwing haymakers left, right, eventually it's going to get to a point where they're not going to be able to hold their arms up anymore. They're not going to be able to swing those fists as much. They're not going to be able to, like, stay light on their feet to be able to dodge your stuff. And so you just stay back, take the punches, absorb the blows, deflect them as best you can, and then get to a certain point where you're like, okay, you're exhausted and I'm still good, and you just hit them with one good one, right? Or like a bunch of them, and just wear them down enough. And so it's that, but with somebody who can't die, or can't stay dead.
Right.
And that's just, like you said.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but that's just what Squee did, and that's brilliant, very clever. I thought it was cool. Dan Sheehan, it's mentioned in his bio at the top of the story that he is an author and a comedy writer. And I mean, what a perfect combination for a resume for somebody who's going to be writing this particular story, because it's serious but also comedic. And so you get somebody who's a professional author combined with a comedic one.
Right, so they know how to do comedy, but they also know how to do not comedy.
Well, and they know how to do comedy, but also know how to do good writing as well, right? Which is important and relevant. Like,
well, not that comedy is not good writing, but you know what I mean.
It depends, yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're looking for like jokes per, like, you know, however many jokes per million, right? Then yeah, you might be sacrificing like good writing, because you're just looking for the jokes. This is comedic writing, right? It's good writing that is funny as well, and has something to say in the story.
Right, and that's really the important part.
Yeah.
But the other half of it, or the other portion of it, I wouldn't call it a half, is really, you know, trying to stay true to the essence of the characters that are in the story.
Yeah.
And I think they did try to do that fairly well.
Yeah.
I think there were a couple of parts where I think they like tried a bit too hard, and it felt like somebody who maybe didn't really feel the essence of Goblins tried too hard to make it sound like the essence of Goblins.
Okay.
But there were only a couple of spots where it was like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the only other thing for you is this quote, if you want me to read it out.
Yeah, sure.
So there was the quote that when Squee is like addressing his people about the celebration, right? I mean, Rarp gets squashed, and so the celebration was then going to have to end because Rarp died. But instead, Rarp is alive. Now, Squee and Bulp know that that's because Rarp is a Phyrexian. And Squee tells Bulp to go off and whatever. But Squee then goes and addresses his people. And one of the things that he says is, I'm sure some of you heard Rarp got smashed up real bad. And it's true, Rarp looks terrible.
Yeah. So, like, just the fact that he said it and said it like that was like... It was goblin-y.
Yeah.
It was goblin-y.
Yeah. Because it's like, I'm not going to lie to you, right? He looks real bad, but he's alive, so we're going to party. And, like, I think either somebody asked a question or Squee just got to a point and was like, now, don't ask any more questions about Rarp. We're having a party, you know? It's just like, let's ignore all of that and go hang out and have fun.
Don't say the word Phyrexian. Party time.
And then, sure enough, all the goblins did have a party time by turning Squee into a Phyrexian.
Yep.
So, I mean, these are some of the things that I wanted to talk about, but I want you to be able to still, like, talk about goblin-y stuff, unless you had more to say on that. Go ahead.
No.
Okay. I thought by the look on your face that you had more to say.
I'm just worried that what you're about to say isn't about the story.
It is.
Okay, go ahead.
So I liked the story, and it was super important that it get told, etc. One of the things that I find interesting is that because the story needed to be told, it was so contained, there isn't art for this story.
Right.
There just isn't. And again, that doesn't mean the story didn't need to be told. That's why I prefaced it with what I did. It's important that this story have been told. But the two pieces of art in this were Squee, obviously, and Urtai, obviously, because Urtai was also in the story. But because we have reviewed these in the order that they were released, and if you read these in the order that they were released, then you already read a story where you saw Urtai's art being shown. Now, it's gorgeous art, show it as many times as you like, but that means that there was one piece of unique or new art being shown off in this story, which to me feels like too few, because it's one. Again, I struggle with what that means, though, because the story still needed to be told. So what other art could have been used? Probably not much. What else could have been done? I don't know. It just is something where if your stories are going to have the artwork interspersed throughout because you're trying to show off your set while telling your stories, I wish there was more art there. Yeah. But I don't have any suggestions for which arts could have gone there because...
Goblin art, man. There's goblin art in this set.
Sure, but I guess it's just because it's not Bulp, and because kind of the only time that we see the goblins is when Squee is talking to them, and they don't really have much of a reaction, or there's Spurna, but then she's a Phyrexian. Like, there's one Phyrexian goblin that I recall, Splatter Goblin, but it's jumping out of a skyship. Like, that's not any of these goblins, right? Because this is just one clan. There's goblins all over the place. We still have Rulik Mons, right, who is a legendary goblin in the set, but Rulik Mons is not part of Squee's clan. So, like, I get it, right?
I don't think it has to be that specific. I think when they talked about goblins and sort of the culture a little bit, they could have put a picture of a goblin jumping out of a plane, you know?
Yeah, it's just that was a paragraph or two away from where Squee's picture was, so it would have just been like two pictures right on top of each other, and then a whole story of nothing but Urtai in there as well. Regardless, like I said, I mean, if people have suggestions, let me know, but it's just something I wanted to point out. It doesn't mean that the story is bad, and it doesn't mean that it shouldn't have been released. It's just, hey, there was only one new piece of art here. I wish there was more, but I do not have a suggestion for how it could have been better. Right. So for the side story, it may have just been like, well, this is all we got. We need to tell the story. We want to tell the story, so we put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, with Salvation, like, that probably would have been a crazy cool art.
Yeah,
to see Salvation when Salvation came out of Squee and wasn't yet Sisay.
That, I feel like, is a product of the story taking more liberties than R&D was aware of at the time that they made the set.
Right.
Right? Because Salvation being the Salvation Sphere, a.k.a. Squee's little, toy, I have something to talk about that in a second, but that's the kind of thing where that feels a lot more than the story was trying to get into.
Yeah. I feel like in the past, though...
Or than the set was trying to get into, I should say.
That they have done art pieces that were basically just for the story. They didn't actually appear on cards.
You are possibly thinking of characters that were featured in the Commander sets, and so we didn't see them in the main set release, but they were commanders in the Commander release, if they were talking about particular characters. old, like years ago.
That's
yeah.
what I'm talking about.
But that doesn't mean that, I don't know if they were fully just created for the story. It may have been like promotional in some capacity, and then they were shown in the story but not on an actual card necessarily. Could have been like, well, this is the announcement art for the set or something like that, and so that's what they're showing.
Yeah, but I feel like I don't remember any of them specifically, but I feel like they were a little bit more specific to what was happening in the story for it to have made sense for them to be promotional material.
But if it was a long time ago, that's because the stories were being written alongside the sets being made, and not two different departments that seemingly never talk to each other.
Yeah.
So that's a different story. And again, I try not to sit around here and just crap on their current model, even though I think it's very bad. But
yeah,
if it works for them, they'll keep it around until it doesn't, and then we got to go through a whole new era of storytelling again. But let's talk about, you brought up Salvation. Is it cool if I move on to talk about, let's talk about Salvation. I think it's very interesting. Urtai is looking for the Salvation Sphere, aka Squeeze Toy. And if you're unaware of the joke, that was the joke years ago, is that Squee had a toy. It was Squeeze Toy. You know, a Squeeze Toy. That's the joke. That's it. You heard it. Start to finish, that was it. So, now that Squee has become such a beloved character, and it was immortal, so couldn't die, and was going to be around a while, and constantly had his toy with him, if they ever wanted to keep, or if they wanted to continue to depict that toy, they needed to do something with it, I guess, is their philosophy. And I don't disagree with them, because that joke gets real old after the first time you've heard it.
Right.
It's like, hey, here's Squeeze Toy. Haha, I get it. Hey, it's Squeeze Toy. Okay, yeah, you mentioned that already. It's very funny, thanks. Well, what about Squeeze Toy? Yes, I get it. Squeeze Toy, Squeeze Toy. Great, hilarious. So instead what they did was...
the toy is not squeezable.
Nope, it is not. But it is Squeeze Toy, get it? So...
Yes, it's a dumb joke.
What they decided...
It's funny the first 5 seconds, and then after that, never again.
What they decided to do was to turn that into something more relevant, say that it is the Salvation Sphere, and it is part of the legacy weapon, and it is now important. Okay, makes perfect sense. I like how they did that.
It's cool.
Yes, and then it gets to like have a conversation with Squee and kind of tell him about life and how Squee's existence works and how his immortality works, and that they get to talk like old friends, which is cool as well, I think. One thing that I thought was interesting, and I don't know how you felt about this, but I'm curious to hear what you have to say, is that when Salvation comes out and is talking to Squee in the afterlife, if you will, or like the space between, Salvation is giving a lot of in-depth information. That is the kind of stuff I love. Give me the explanation. Let me understand why and how it works, what's going on. Like, I love that. So I was eating that up. I'm like sitting in that section, I'm like, yes, give me more Salvation, explain it more, I appreciate it. Until Squee gets to a point, and the story is just like, Squee's bored.
Yeah.
He hasn't been dead for this long in a long time, he's bored. And I was like, bored? I was like, I'm enjoying this, I want to hear more. And yet, it's stereotypical Goblin, right? Of like, you're talking too much. Too many big words, stop doing it. But the story mentions multiple times that Squee and Bulb are smart goblins. Right. Does that mean that they are smart for goblins, and so like it's a low bar, or does it mean that they are smart? I mean, Squee is 400 plus years old, right. So a being having been around that long has to have picked up things here and there. Right. That's just how it works, right? So you've got someone that's that old and that hopefully wise or at least intelligent and having been around for so long.
Right.
But yet when they're hearing about a truth of the world or the realm or a truth from before the realm existed, one first says, I'm bored. Or, you know, the story tells us Squee is bored. And then later on, Salvation's going on this diatribe of like explaining all this stuff. And again, eating it up, right? That's what I'm ready. Give it to me. And Squee's like, I'm sorry, I gotta interrupt you. That's not what I was asking you. I just meant, like, Squee said, how did I get here? And Salvation's like, well, this happened and this happened. And when you die, your soul is taken here and blah, blah, blah. And Squee's like, I'm sorry. I meant, how did I get here specifically?
Right.
And
like,
Salvation...
I don't care about the inner workings of my soul because that's your job.
Yep.
It was stupid. That was one of the moments where I felt like it was them trying to be like goblins when in reality, like, it missed the mark.
It's also possible, right? I'm not saying you're wrong. It's also possible that that was their way of saying, like, we've explained this like 75% of the way, but if we try to explain it the other 25%, it's going to contradict some things, so we're just going to stop. It's a tactic.
Yeah.
And it could be what they're doing. It could not be, right? I'm not saying it definitively is, but that's a tactic that could be used of like, okay, well, we figured out all this and it makes perfect sense, but if we try to go further and like actually close it off, it stops making sense and it starts contradicting other things. So maybe Squee gets bored of it and just stops Salvation from saying it all.
Right.
It's a possibility. Again, not saying that it is one way or another. It's a thought. It's a possibility.
Yeah, or maybe they just want to hold on to that information and reveal it in later stories.
Also possible. Who can say? Especially if the parts of the legacy weapon are going to be brought together, we very well may see Squee again, since the Salvation Sphere is with Squee. Squee is back. So, like, yeah. And then I just wanted to talk about the other stuff to close it out, but I don't know if you have more that you wanted to say. So, I feel like this story was a huge deal. A huge deal. Sorry if you're hearing that noise. There's a lot of things going on outside, inside, etc. But I feel like this story was a big deal. Squee has become a very big fan favorite character. Right? Again, we've discussed and we know, or at least I feel like I know, that Squee was included as comic relief. That's it. And then when Squee kind of existed longer than that, again, similar to the Salvation Sphere or Squee's toy, they needed to do more with him. So what did they do? They gave him immortality. They let him be captured by Urtai and tortured and murdered over and over again, etc. Now that this side story is here, we get more from Squee. Squee being a fan favorite character, Squee's immortality is a huge deal. Well, guess what? After this story, Squee's not immortal anymore. But I feel like when these stories were coming out, I didn't really see many people talking about that.
Right.
Is that because people are over it? I doubt it. Is it because there's so many things going on that, like, you just don't have time to do that? That's more what I think. Is that there were, and again, I'll harp on it only for a moment. There were 10 stories released in 8 days. Hurry up and read them, because the second that the final story comes out, a few hours later, the spoilers are going to be revealed for the story. So if you didn't read them day of, I mean, really, it's just the main stories, not really the side ones. But if you didn't read the main stories the day they were released, or within the 10 days or 8 days that they were released, you're out of luck. It was spoiled for you. If it wasn't already spoiled from the leaks, which it was for us. But that's a different story. So, if you didn't get a chance to read the story because you were trying to read the main story so that you weren't spoiled at the last second, then guess what? You have no idea that a possible favorite character of yours has been stripped of his immortality and then completed as well. Not in that order, but still completed. That wasn't talked about. Squee was a Phyrexian for a little while. That's a huge deal.
But yeah, and I mean, the other thing is a big deal that he then was not.
Yeah.
Right? The Salvation made it so that he then was no longer a Phyrexian. Both of those things are a huge deal.
Yes, and that he got to choose. That he chose mortality. He chose, give me one more, right? And it was his, that wasn't even one of the choices. So I should say he kind of manufactured it for himself. Because the choices were, go back in the loop, die over and over again, be resurrected over and over again, or you're finally dead now. Go to the ether, go meet your friends, and, you know, all those that you've lost.
Right.
And live on in eternity and let your soul rest. And he was like, what about option 3? And Salvation's like, I didn't give you an option 3. And Squee's like, well, here's my option 3. And makes it himself, which again goes to the intelligence, his wisdom. Because again, an unintelligent person would be told, hey, A or B. And they go, okay, well, A is this and B is that, and I'm going to pick B. You know, whatever the 2 options are. Squee is wise. And so Squee says, you know what? How about a 3rd choice? And makes it up himself and says, I deserve...
This thing is what I want.
But is able to look back on his life and say, you know what? Before I became immortal, I didn't die for a very long time. Once I became immortal, I'm dying all the time.
Right.
And Squee is basically, I guess, coming to the realization that it's unpleasant. And you know what? And even says at the end of the story to Bulb, things tend to work out for old Squee. So, like, Squee is kind of putting it on his luck, I guess.
Right.
To say, you know what? Give me one more. Give me a life, right? I am alive. Let me be alive one more time. And that's it. And when I'm dead, that'll be the end. And I can then move on to the ether.
Right.
But none of this endless cycle of death, and I'm not done here yet. But Squee even kind of says to Bulb at the end, like, if the Phyrexians are here, we've got work to do. And so it seems like, despite the fact that he is only 1 life remaining, 1 life to live, he's going to go out against the Phyrexians. Now, we don't know if following the interaction with Salvation in the between space, if Salvation is still with him. I assume that Salvation is still with Squee, but we don't know that for a fact.
Right.
And again, presumably, if the pieces of the legacy weapon are coming together in any capacity, we will likely see that eventually. But otherwise, that's it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Anything else on this one?
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
I had my theory.
Oh.
My theory, since Salvation was able to grant Squee life as not a Phyrexian,
Okay.
my theory going forward is that Salvation will be the salvation of the Phyrexians just overrunning all of these places and people.
Okay.
They're coming through and converting everybody, but I think ultimately, because I always thought from the beginning that what was going to ultimately happen was the completion would be reversed.
Yeah, I think most people, I imagine most people hope that that's the case with Tamio and Ajani being a thing.
Yeah, I always had a theory that that was what would ultimately happen. But now that in this story we see Salvation basically being able to do that for Squee, I think, especially since he's part of the legacy weapon, I think we're going to see Salvation play a part in that changing everybody back process. That is my theory.
That would be interesting, definitely. Because there's got to be something, right? Because I agree with you. I think it's how it has to happen, because otherwise we lose 3 planeswalkers, like, very quickly. And I doubt that's going to occur, although it's possible. But we'll see.
Yeah.
It's probably more likely that if and when the completion is reversed, that they just are different people now, because then it's easier to write them, because if you don't know how to write a character and you don't kill them off, but you do complete them, it's easier to just say, well, whatever new author comes around, they're going to write that person from now on.
Right.
It's like, sure, I guess that makes sense. You got it. Anyway, that's a different discussion for a different time. We'll get to those stories and we'll talk about them then. But for this side story, it was a good one. We enjoyed it. If you also enjoyed it, or if you didn't enjoy it, no matter what the case may be, we would love to hear your opinions on it down in the comment section below, because honestly, being able to come together as a group, you all and us, and discuss these stories and be able to say, you know what, we really loved it, but we would love to know if you did not love it and why. I think that's a really great way for all of you to join us as we show off our...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
That's right. Thank you so much for joining us. We really hope everybody enjoyed this video. Again, all opinions, comment section down below, good, bad, or indifferent. We want to hear from you, so please share those with us.
Please.
Yes. We will be back with another one of these as soon as we can.
Especially with these stories, because I think they're tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's bits and pieces that need to be filled in, and theories that can be hatched but can't be solved for many stories to come.
Sure.
So I think these stories, of all the stories that we read, are pretty high up there on the we're looking for comments and whatever people can communicate back to us.
As well as any time that, like, you know, if I misspeak or say something incorrect or whatever.
Of course.
I love being corrected if I'm saying something wrong so that I can fix it for the future, etc. So, okay. So, that is going to be the end, like I said, or as I was saying before. We will be back with another one of these as soon as we can. At this point, because we've messed up a couple of times now, I don't even want to make promises of when. We will get it to you as soon as we can. Life happens, things get busy, and then you film while people are running around and screaming in the background, which I'm sure you heard. I know you did. There's nothing we can do about it. I'm very sorry. We're trying. But it's either that or we film after they all go to bed and then we're exhausted. So I would have rather had our faculties about us so that we could actually film the story. So I do apologize if that was distracting in any way. But we'll be back. Like I said, we have about 3 more of these, if I recall, if not a couple more on top. So stay tuned for more of those. But for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.